it's pretty amazing. Go ahead.
Okay, so today, notice our concept map. It's an outline. So we're going to give you an overview and background. Talk a little bit about the Prisoner of Age project with Ron Levine, an artist that we're going to actually exhibit at the Fisher Gallery, I'm excited, and has an exhibit at Alcatraz. If any of you are going to be in Alcatraz, it's going to be through June. It's so cool. I just thought tell you a little bit more about the California Women's Institute, the Golden Girls, the artwork that we're doing with them, and then hopefully we'll have time to do some experiential exercise. If not, we'll tell you about them so you can bring them back to those of you who are teaching. And
So we've got, as our next slide, something that might be familiar to you. What We Say to Dogs from the Gary Larson, The Far Side, and what's happening here. Ginger is the dog. Okay, Ginger, I've had it. You stay out of the garbage. Understand, Ginger? Stay out of the garbage or else. And what do dogs hear? Blah, 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 Ginger. Blah, 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 Ginger. Blah, 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 Ginger. Having said that, when we teach, what do we and our colleagues commonly use? We use words. We use words. We either use them in PowerPoints, or we use words on a whiteboard or a blackboard, either spontaneously or with something prepared. And basically, what about the students who aren't strong, either verbally or aren't strong auditorily as their primary mode of learning? And what about those who are strong visual and auditory learners? Might their horizons be expanded in some way if we use visual means and other kinds of means that don't primarily rely on words? Having said that, we're using words right now. What if we had started our presentation by throwing out a bunch of statistics to you? So here we go. For example, we could tell you that using data from the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics, Human Rights Watch calculates that the number of sentenced federal and state prisoners who are age 65 or older grew an astonishing 94 times faster than the sentenced prisoner population between 2007 and 2010. The older prison population increased by a whopping 63%, while the total prison population grew by a mere 7%. Okay, so here's the question for you. Can I see just a show of hands or a nod or whatever? How many of you began thinking about where you're going tonight, what you're going to be eating later on, who you're going to be meeting, and when is this going to be over? So, in other words, tuning out. And everybody, we all process and learn things and new information in different ways. And just to prove the Ginger point, Ginger is obviously not an auditory or visual learner. How many times have you yourselves, either as a student or a professor or an instructor, taught something that you considered to be completely clear or even brilliantly done, and you get back a test or a paper, and it's like, wait, did I teach this? Where's the disconnect? The disconnect is in the cognitive learning style. So we have this expression, don't let this happen to you. We've got Lucy and Charlie Brown. Oh, what?
I'm sorry, I lost Lucy.
Oh. Shoot. Well, anyway, we have Lucy and Charlie Brown listening attentively, not to a scintillating lecture.
Okay,
We've popped ahead fast, but I'm gonna keep going, okay?
I want to show Lucy.
Okay.
Maybe.
I just want to go to a picture is worth 1,000 words. Here she is. That's right, right? So she's really interested. And we've got, do we not have either students that look like this or on some continuum feel that way, or are what we call in the syllabi electronically preoccupied?
Because I teach the 6 to 10 p.m. section.
Right. And then it becomes an even greater challenge. That's absolutely right. It's the 6 to 10. So we actually don't want this happening to any of your students. So there is that expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And what we want now is how, as educators, can we capitalize on the meaning of that expression? And that's what we want you to keep in mind during this presentation. We just happen to be using the example of aging in prison, but Anne and I, we write together and we present together as well as our good friends. We've done this with sexuality and aging. We've done it with HIV, AIDS in older adults, grief work, women and gender issues. And so think about, while you're doing this, some of you particularly are interested in prison, that's clear, or are steeped in prison work for many years. But you may have other interests and passions that you can think of. How can I flip this and use this to my advantage so that Lucy and Charlie Brown don't happen in class, okay? And that somebody isn't really tuning out. So just that's something along the way. And then, let's see, what's the other piece? This is the quick review, because I'm aware of time. It's like, quick review. What are the three main cognitive styles of learning? Perfect. Exactly. Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic would be the flight attendant here, right? And what are the common characteristics of each style? What do visual learners, how do visual learners learn? How do auditory learners learn? How do primarily kinesthetic learners learn? The visual, people take in, and since we don't want to spend a huge amount of time, especially because we lost time in the beginning, we have a handout that kind of summarizes for you some of the ways that the learners take in that information, as well as what are some of the means that enhance those kinds of learnings. And so basically we want to just have you be mindful of, and we will as well as I finish my piece, use multimodal learning to remember that visuals do matter, and to remember that, as Rachel was saying, it's that kinesthetic learners to encourage interaction. That sometimes experience for many of us solidifies something that's remembered. So that's the learning style piece. And we come to, here's the different learning styles. We see the Prisoners of Age project. And you had mentioned, I can't remember, it's your first name? Carl. So you had mentioned, Richard Ross. We're looking at someone whose name is Ron Levine. So maybe some of you know his work, but he is an acclaimed photographer, not just having to do with the field of aging, just in general, an acclaimed photographer. And basically, he published a book called Prisoners of Age. And he's been so generous with Anne and with anybody he works with in using his photos from this book that we wanted to put a plug in for it. So we encourage you to look up Prisoners of Age. And we're going to give you a website where you can also get some of his videos. But the way he got involved in prison in particular, he's Canadian. And he was listening to a broadcast, a Canadian broadcast corporation, and it was a segment on aging inmates in Alabama. And basically, he kind of described it. I wrote down the quote. He described it as a hidden world that he had no idea existed, right? And it actually was, just in case you want to know, the Hamilton Correctional Institute for the Aged and Infirm. And so what happened was, Anne actually told me this because she's worked a lot with Ron. He literally pulled over to the side of the road when he heard this because he was so taken by the broadcast and the information that he was just really stunned. It really grabbed him. It wasn't just an intellectual curiosity. And it led him to making a trip to the Alabama prison. He actually went down there, and that's what eventually turned into Prisoners of Age project. So for him, he found this to be a newfound or an additional passion for him. And he really wanted to, he became zealous about raising the consciousness of society about the aging population and about overcrowding of older adults, about the higher costs of caring for older adults in prison, and in a sense also just the human dimension of growing old in prison. And so the other thing, as you may realize by now, is that Prisoners of Age is not just a series of photographs, but it's also interviews, and not just with the inmates, but also the correctional personnel, and both in prisons in the United States as well as Canada. And just so you know, and maybe many of you know this, that some of them were old when they entered or middle-aged when they entered and have aged more, and others have just entered at a later age and have gotten even older. So we want to show you a clip, if we can, and this is the one that's from prisonersofage.com. Okay, it's prisonersofage.com. There are other videos, and you're going to meet some, what's that? Will it work?
The sound is working.
The sound? AV guy. Oh. I may have to act it out. This would not be good, me acting out Agent Jimmy here. Here's Jimmy, okay? But there's actually a critical component to the learning.
Yeah, I don't have the ability to hook up sound right now.
All the difference in the world and highlights the
sorry.
point of integrated
Play it off the
media in the
computer
arts.
audio.
Should be able to.
How do I, it's, if you look on Prisoner of Age,
Prisonersofage.com.
there's quite a few of them.
Right, and this is one that's on video, but it's linked to his prisonersofage.com, and he's got a number of them. We kind of like
If we minimize
some of
it.
what happens on this in particular from the point of this workshop, which is why we chose it. And also his story, it's poignant for the purposes of this workshop in terms of the learning.
Oh, no.
A
Sorry.
lot of them are poignant, but if not, I'm gonna say what happens. What do you think?
Okay, that's
Should I
fine.
just,
Yeah, because now I can't even get back to,
do you want me to just talk about that?
yes, please.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about this, and it's unfortunate because he has this, a very rich, slow-talking voice, and one of the things that's very strong about Ron is that he's a talented interviewer. So kind of like a good social worker or a talented qualitative anthropologist, he steps out and he has a very friendly, non-judgmental demeanor, and it really encourages the people who he's photographing to talk very candidly, and not in a way where they're trying to manipulate him or put on a better
Can't
side
get
or
it
anything
back
like
to
that. So part of what
the
reveals
presentation.
here is what's important to him about being there, having been there so long, and basically what happens is his voice starts to choke up as he gets into more emotionally vulnerable material for himself. And he's
I wanted to
particularly
have
talking
it
about
how it should
what we
before.
would call
Maybe
in
if we
gerontology a negative life
go to here.
and trying to make
Like it was
peace in
showing
some
me what
ways
was on the screen
with
in my
and
notes.
reconcile
Yeah, we're
what's happening with him, not only in
This one.
prison, but also outside.
one right
His
here.
older mother is still alive, and the other piece that he talks about is he still wants, in terms of the stigma and the shame, he still has
Like, how do I
the
get out of this
sense of
screen?
business in relation to his mom, and wants to be able to get out before she dies. And so as he's talking about this, his voice starts to notice.
Can I get out of this
getting into
completely?
his body work, it's starting to choke up right in his throat. He's trying to fight back tears, and you feel it in a way. And what I would have said to you was, after we saw this, because it doesn't look promising when we get in the video, is that how many of you, if I had just told you what I just said to you right now, Jimmy's voice chokes up, or, you know, when people are talking about this, this is what happens, how much more
There, that's
effective is it hearing it and seeing it? Than me telling you about it, it's the same truth. I'm telling you correctly what took place, but there's no comparison. Even if you're a good speaker, there's no comparison. And so that's, I would urge you to check out Jimmy on Vimeo, on the prisonersofage.com. So any thoughts or comments, reactions, just about what I was just saying, or? Okay, well, what's that? And trauma, yeah, so much, so much. That's absolutely right. So now we're just, oh, now it's flipping by itself? Great.
I'm sorry, you guys. So technology's great until it's not. Okay.
And so basically, the other thing I want to highlight from this, that we can also highlight to our students about the photographs and about prisoners of age or anybody who's working in this field, is that, yes, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but the themes that are embedded in the photographs and the individual stories are very powerful. They really resonate with our profession's emphasis on the search for social justice and the improvement in social and economic conditions of people's lives, and trying to reduce individual oppression and social oppression. And so that's the other piece where there's such an intersection between the pictures, the words, the auditory, the visual, all of that. And we're going to have more exercises for you that don't rely, thank God, on the auditory. So I'm going to turn this over to you with
Here's
CIW.
here's just a couple more.
More pictures. These are all from Ron's book.
Okay. So this is the California Women's Institute. And as I told you at the beginning, I got involved in 2006. And I'm going to give you some brief statistics about it. Maybe not. Keeps going. I know. But it didn't want me to, so keep going here.
No, you could do some of them. Well, you could, I think the one that's interesting is what it's designed to hold and how many inmates there actually are. Right, there's like, should I say it?
Yeah, so just really
Yeah.
quickly,
I think
it
it's-
opened
I think
in
it's worth it.
52 on 120 acres, located 37 miles east of LA. It's a campus-like design. In fact, when I first went there, I was like, oh, this isn't too bad. As I went there with Eileen, there was a
Little did you
big
know.
green area. They had a dog program at the time. A lot of changes have happened. It was designed for 1,300 inmates and now houses over 2,000 inmates. There's approximately 200 women there aging in prison. They're over the age of 55. And then at the time, they had programs in art and forestry, training, bicycle refurb. Now there's like nothing. They're in their cells 23 hours out of the 24 hours. They had a social work intern, a warden at the time when we started in 2006. And now the warden has changed multiple times. And also the prison population has changed. And so the Golden Girls tell us how the women who are coming in are much more violent and disrespectful, a lot of drugs. And so the way that they're dealing with it is keeping them in their cells 23 out of the 24. So when we go for the art expression workshops that we do, aren't they, they're like all calm because they're so excited to be out of their cells. And so some of the issues and challenges, this is, oh goodness, I don't know what's going on with my,
This actually, by the way, this is not a caption that Ron wrote. This is a literal quote from this particular woman.
I don't know what's going on
Prisons-
with this palette.
And then, oh boy.
All right. So some of the issues and challenges are eating, sleeping, walking, standing, bathing, getting out of bed, and the bunks, they can't even get to the upper bunk. Drop alarms are a big issue. You wouldn't think about it, but, when they say you have to drop to the ground, they can't get up. Or sometimes they can't hear drop to alarm, then they get a citation. And so there's just little things that are going through the issues and challenges of growing old, but in addition, they're, coming with other issues as
Yeah,
well.
I mean, that's really the point, is that prison is no exception to where you have that discrepancy between the statistics of capability and dysfunction. So you have much higher rates of mental illness, physical illness, and chronic conditions in the community, in institutionalized older adults as compared to community-based older adults, and prison is no exception. You see that exacerbated, especially if you're in prison 23 hours a day. How are you keeping your muscle flexibility? How are you keeping muscle tone? How are you keeping anything to be able to do the activities of daily living that, in a sense, create a sense of your own self-image and maintain a sense of dignity for people?
Yeah, so now I just want to tell you a little bit about the Golden Girls. Again, these are the women age 50 and over, actually, that they've called themselves the Golden Girls. They really advocated for change, but now they have lost a lot of those different things. And yeah, just a little aside, so Eileen Hongo was the student, and she went to a presentation at the California Endowment, and she saw these wonderful pictures, and so she went up after and said, "Could I use some of those pictures for my PowerPoints in my class?" And they're like, "Oh, we don't know, they're from Ron Levine, but email him and see." So she emails them and says, "I loved your pictures, can I use them?" He, of course, said sure, and she said, "Why don't you have any pictures of older women?" And he said, "I can't get into women's prison." And he said, and so she says, well, Dr. Katz can get you in. And so we got him into CIW, and he took pictures. These are the actual women, Donna, who we
Donna's in
wanted
the
you to
center.
hear from.
Yeah.
But if you go on the website, you'll see this video as well. And they're all still there.
She's there for having murdered her husband, by the way, many years ago.
Yeah, so the video
The
shows,
DV
she
situation
tells the
and
story that
incest.
if she knew that there were resources out there, that when she saw her, like he was abusing her, and when he went onto the 5-year-old, she killed him. And she said, and she would do it again. But she said if she knew resources, possibly she would have went to a shelter, but it was a long time ago. She's been there over 30 years now. Her mother raised her children. Now she has grandchildren, but has kept in contact with them. In fact, remember the first focus group, and I was so amazed that she had kept this relationship going with these grandchildren. It was really, talk about strengths perspective, and we really, honed in on that. So it was pretty wonderful. So this would have been the video. I'm not going to even try. Okay, so just a little bit of an aside. While we were getting prepared for this, I got a newsletter from them, and they were talking about their cat program. There used to be like hundreds of feral cats there. Now there's 18, but the Golden Girls take care of them. It used to be a dumping ground when it first started, for cats. So this is another one of the Golden Girls. She was born in LA, age 66. She has 3 children. She has a daughter and a son. And let me see if I can tell more about it. Let me see what
Which
else
they-
about Helen. And the thing that's important to know about her is that we have this other great program at USC. Heidi Rummel runs it, and she brings interns in. And the other thing we did with the focus group was we said, what do you need? They go, we need somebody to write a writ and to get them out of prison. So actually, she got involved, and Helen's been out now for a year, and really exciting and doing well. She Facebooks and she texts, and we wanted to do like a film on her and have a student involved in it, but she's afraid that it would affect her probation. So she's not doing that, but it's pretty cool. And so this is some of her insights on prison.
Through the artwork exercises and the art
Yeah.
expression workshops,
Yeah. So
which we are going to do with you. Do we have
maybe,
time?
Maybe.
Maybe.
So this slide and the next few that follow are just a few example of the completed projects, along with some excerpts and letters that they wrote me regarding thinking for the creative art expression workshops. Actually, Eileen Hongo and a group of, she calls them the Healing Squad. They're volunteer students that go in and help her with these art expression workshops. And it's pretty cool. We based it on the work of David Gusak. And he also, if you just look him up, 2007, and he goes from the simple project to the more complex projects. And so we just based it on his 6-week sessions, and we have 6 projects that I'm just going to quickly tell you about. So again, these are just actual words. These are actual projects that they do. June finds that that she can have fun and relax and enjoy herself with her peers during these programs. And while Jane feels the workshops are a breath of fresh air and in a stifling environment. Actually, we're going to be having Eileen and I have a small article coming out in the Journal of Traumatology that Tina Massey is editing, and so we kind of wrote the workshop up, so you can keep an eye out for that special journal. So the non-dominant hand is one of the projects, and utilizes the unused side of the brain, explores different feelings of comfort and creativity. Some of the women kept a journal of their left and their right-handed dialogue, which was pretty cool. And, it's just let's exercise. The drawing of the first home or the school can really provide an avenue of self-exploration and reflection into the past. Artwork ranged from a happy home with a big backyard in the hillsides where one escaped the turmoil and violence at home, to, something like this, and, memories of the first home. If you notice, it's just raining on the little girl with the heart. they tell so much. You don't have to be an art therapist or be trained in the arts to be able to interpret these, because they're just so, vivid and self-explanatory. They dream of going home. The name Embellishment is another project which provides this creative opportunity for prisoners to design a personal name embellishments. And one of the most traumatic experiences of incarceration is the loss of identity. And identification numbers are used in place of names, and often the prisoner has to put their cell number on there. Celebrate your name and not your number. Memory box, you probably have done this, in your other work, grief work, and things like this. And it's just a private place to put things that participants treasure from someone who has passed away, or place items that they want their family to remember after their death. A lot of them express that they may not get out before they die. And so this was so touching for the people. And the white paper sculpture is just another one. It's, and they say, it's amazing what we could do with just paper and glue, and they can do it in their own cells. And it just provides this free creative experience using only paper and glue. The paper has to be torn and shaped with their fingers. They're not allowing any scissors there. So that's a little bit of a challenge when you go into the prisons of what you can bring in. But again, David Gousset gives great explanations of this in his work. It's just so interesting that, some of them had never even seen stickers, or the self-adhesive things. And then, again, this was an interactive group project where each participant drew something in such a manner, like to tell another member about themselves. And, for example, the picture, someone drew the ground, and then someone else drew the trees and the sky and the sun. And here's another one. And what it did was really build this whole sense of community, and it was pretty great.
And that sense of community, of course, was critical, because those of you who are involved in prison work and have this interest know that even if you're crowded together, that's what particularly makes you isolate more in order to grab onto whatever privacy and uniqueness you can have, which fosters more isolation. And so the fact that this could foster some real sense of community and connection is incredibly valuable. You can't pay for that in the prison.
So we thought, since this is interactive, and how do you integrate everything into, one 45-minute session at this point, we thought we'd do a little name embellishment at the end. So
We have another one at the end, but something different, but
we're not
we're
gonna
gonna
have
do
time for
this.
that, but we're
This
gonna
will be
give
a
it to you to take.
This will be a sped up version. And where is the?
Yeah, so what we're gonna, do you wanna give the directions?
No, do you have the?
I have
Oh, okay, yeah, let me give you then some directions. Anne's gonna give out the crayons. Basically, you want to think about your name. And think about, what does your name mean to you? How do you feel about your name? Are you named after somebody in particular? How did you get your name? Who made that decision? And if so, what's your relationship or connection or not to the person or the source of that name? And if you're not named after somebody, how was your name chosen? So what we'd like you to do is, in thinking about those things or whatever comes up in relation to that, just write down, either in words or draw or represent in whatever way you want, and we're not collecting them, a way that addresses and incorporates your thoughts and your associations connected to your name.